I love the outdoors. I was the leader of my scout troop and was working on Eagle. My younger brother was not so keen. With summer just around the corner, I made it my mission to get him interested. I found a group that did weekend camping outings up the nearby mountain. Easy hikes and a semi-permanent campground. It was barely being out of a cabin, but it was tents and sky, so I called it good enough. Friday afternoon we packed up gear into a pair of vans. There were 12 of us total that were going out on the trip. 3 adults, a couple of teens, and a slew of kids under 11. The other teens didn't seem like they cared too much. A lot of rewards from parents hoping to catch a free weekend. They were happy to throw around a lot of rude songs and get the other kids riled up. My brother was having a bad time, and I was desperate to get him to have fun. I built up the joy of being at a campfire, the marshmallow toasting, and the swapping stories around a blaze. We arrived at the site with a few hours of daylight left. I wanted it to get dark so we could get to the fire part before my brother pulled the plug and begged to head home. As we finished setting up tents, a pair of guys came through. They were wearing hunting vests and carrying guns. They approached me. "You going to be here long?" The guy seemed off. Not just drunk, but a little drugged. 2 days, leaving afternoon Sunday. He nodded. "Okay, that works," he said. He and the other guy wandered off. I pushed the encounter off, glad my brother was in the tent at the time. We gathered around the fire, and my brother and the other kids went right for the food. It was all we could do to pull them back and keep them from getting too close to the fire. I had almost forgotten about the men when we heard a gunshot just outside of camp. I turned to the person in charge. "Is there a hunting season in early summer I don't know about?" The man, a retired park ranger, shook his head. No hunting now." Another shot. And this time, I could swear I heard an impact nearby. I saw some men earlier. They had guns. I thought they were hunters. We heard another crack and then another. At this point, it was too much. The ex-ranger told everyone to get in the vans. We drove down the mountain. Everyone was scared and tried not to talk. When someone asked a question, they were told not to keep at it. Don't work up the other kids. Stay brave for the little ones. They pulled 2 bodies off the mountain the next day. Multiple gunshot wounds. I don't know if they would have come for us next as witnesses, but I'm certain that I was almost a victim. My parents gave me an ultimatum. I could go to summer camp or a church camp. I couldn't stay home. I liked to read and hang out on my computer and wasn't interested in either option. But of the two, camping sounded like it would at least involve some reading time. Arriving at camp wasn't the most auspicious. We showed up to a garbage-strewn parking lot. It smelled like rotting meat and old vomit. My dad talked to the groundskeeper that was shoveling up the bags and debris. Dad came back to the car. High winds knocked over a dumpster. They'll have it cleaned up soon. I got out of the car and tried to ignore the smell. As I got out of the car, I stepped in some of the garbage. It was a piece of braided rope with a busted knot on one side. The rest of the day was uneventful. I met some people, got assigned into a cabin, and went to sleep. The next day, I got to go to my first arts and crafts day. The groundskeeper was also an art director, an older man with gnarled fingers and really tan skin. He smelled strongly of cigarettes. He taught us how to make a rope by taking tall grasses and weaving them into each other. We spent a few hours building a rope, and he took an interest in the kids that could do it faster. I was terrible, and he didn't come over to help me. Later that day, I finally got back to my bunk. The days were longer than I wanted, and I didn't have any time to read. When I got in the cabin, I was annoyed at how much it smelled like cigarettes. I thought maybe one of the other kids was sneaking smokes. The other kids in the cabin denied it, but it annoyed me a lot. I was almost asleep when I smelled the cigarettes. I listened carefully for who was getting up, but all I heard was the floor scraping. Then the door opened and shut, and the smell started to fade. I was afraid to use a flashlight, but the moon was bright, and I could see just well enough. I got out of bed and traced a scraping sound to a chest between two bunks. I dug my fingers under the chest until I found a hole. Pushing the chest out of the way, I pulled up on the hole. There was an area underneath, not too large, but large enough. 2 braided pieces of rope were inside. They looked dirty, and a bone-handled knife. I put one of the ropes in my bag and shut the hole. The next morning, I called my parents to come get me, and I stayed in the dining hall near the phone all day until they showed up. I showed my dad the rope, and he called the sheriffs to come and arrest the groundskeeper. I was a bad kid when I was younger. Petty theft, some car borrowing, and smoking joints in the gym locker room. The only thing I cared to lick for was my heritage. I was Nez Perce on my mom's side, and Irish on my dad's side. I got shipped off to a boys' camp one summer, the kind of place that is supposed to take you outside and teach you to respect things and stay away from drugs or something. I didn't want to go. I ran away from the bus stop twice. The third time, my parents went with me to make sure I got to the camp. We were waiting in a parking lot, and I was upset. Mom was waiting in the car, and Dad had a hand on my shoulder. He wanted me to understand that I had to get better, for Mom. The counselor for the camp was supposed to pick me up, but he was running late. A lot late. "He's not coming, Dad. Let's go. You've held him up twice. About time you learn that it sucks when someone lets you down. We wait." Finally, the van with the logo for the camp, Takhalalapspa, pulled into the gas station at the edge of the parking lot. Dad marched me over and waved to the guy as he got out of the van. "I've got him, right here." The counselor seemed a bit distracted. "I've got to get gas. I'll talk to you after." My dad was insistent. He may have wanted to teach me a lesson, but this was also eating his whole day. He pulled open the door and sat me down. He shut the door and went to the back. The counselor was pumping gas and stopped my dad. "It's packed back there. Put the luggage under his seat." Dad came back to the front and shoved my heavy bag into the space between the door and the seat. I was practically standing on my clothes. "Be good," he told me, and walked back to the car. The counselor got in and started up the van. He didn't ask my name or even look at me. "How far is it to the camp?" I tried to be polite, but I knew I wasn't. He pulled out onto the road and started driving. A few hours. Camp Tacha is away out there." The camp name was Sahaptin, or Nez Perce, for good afternoon. It can be a tough language, but it seemed odd to not pronounce one word right. It was Ta-Tuts, not Cha. I asked him about the treatment program at the camp. "Oh, the Tacha is great. Lots of building cabins and being in the woods." That part checked out. I tried to push him away. "I was told I could see my parents on Thursday?" He looked up at me as we approached a stop sign at the overpass. "Yeah, not the first week, but after. Your parents know how to get to Tacha?" My blood turned cold. Visiting day was Saturday. Mom had drilled that into me, and that was the third time he'd mispronounced the name of the camp. There was no way this guy was from the camp. I pushed open the door and jumped out. I ran at the car behind us shouting, "Stranger, help!" The guy drove off in a hurry. They found the camp van later that day a few miles out. The body of the head counselor was shoved in the back under a blanket.